The wagon wheels groaned against frozen ruts as they rolled into Red Hollow. December wind cut through the canvas covering, carrying the sharp scent of coal smoke and pine. Lena Gracewood pressed her gloved hands together, watching the small mining town emerge from the morning fog like a collection of weathered bones. She was tall for a woman, taller than most men back east, with broad shoulders that filled out her traveling coat. Her hands were strong, marked by years of honest work, and her face carried a kind of stubborn beauty that most folk didn't know what to do with. The scar wasn't visible on her skin, but lived somewhere deeper, put there by a man who'd promised marriage, then walked away when he couldn't make her small enough to fit his life. The driver, a grizzled fellow named Murphy, pulled the horses to a stop before a 2-story building with Morrison's Inn painted in fading letters across its front. He didn't offer to help her down. Lena didn't expect him to. She'd learned that courtesy was often the first thing abandoned when people noticed her height. "This is it," Murphy said, spitting tobacco juice into the muddy street. "Red Hollow. Hope whoever's meeting you ain't the type to change his mind." Lena's jaw tightened. Samuel Morrison had written 4 letters, each one full of promises: a good life, a proper marriage, a man who needed a strong woman to help run his dry goods store. She'd sold everything to buy passage west, believing those carefully penned words. The inn's front door opened, and a woman emerged, small, bird-like, with sharp eyes that took in everything at once. This would be Mrs. Morrison, the innkeeper's wife. Lena had expected Samuel to be there too, but the street remained empty except for a mangy dog nosing through yesterday's garbage. "You the Gracewood woman, Mrs.?" Morrison asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I'm looking for Samuel Morrison, your son." Something flickered across the older woman's face, not quite pity, not quite satisfaction. "He ain't here." "When will he return?" "He won't." "Mrs." Morrison wiped her hands on her apron, a gesture that seemed more about washing away responsibility than cleaning. "Left 2 weeks back. Took the stage to California with the younger Pritchard girl. Pretty little thing. Comes up to about here on him." She held her hand at chest height. The words hit Lena like cold water, but she kept her face still. She'd learned that too, never let them see you buckle. Behind her, Murphy chuckled low in his throat, already crafting the story he'd tell in the saloon tonight. "I see." Lena lifted her carpet bag from the wagon bed. It held everything she owned, now 2 dresses, undergarments, her mother's Bible, the knife her father had carried in the war, and 43 cents. "Is there other lodging in town?" "Mrs." Morrison studied her with those sharp eyes. "Got a room? Top floor, end of the hall. $1 a week, paid in advance. No visitors after dark. No cooking in the room. No noise on Sundays. $1 a week." Lena had enough for 2 weeks, maybe 3 if she didn't eat much. "I'll take it." The climb to the 3rd floor left her legs aching from the long journey. The hallway was narrow, forcing her to turn sideways to navigate past a broken chair someone had abandoned against the wall. The door at the end stuck when she tried to open it, requiring a hard shove that spoke of warped wood and settling foundations. The room was small enough that she could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. A narrow bed with a mattress that sagged in the middle, a washstand with a cracked pitcher, one window that looked out onto the alley where someone had strung laundry between buildings. The lock on the door was old, the kind that could be picked with a hairpin or forced with a strong shoulder. "Mrs." Morrison had followed her up. "Chamber pots under the bed, privies out back, water pumps in the kitchen, but only before 7 in the morning and after 6 at night. Don't want folks traipsing through during meal times." "Thank you." The older woman lingered in the doorway. A woman alone in a mining town. She let the sentence trail off, but her meaning hung in the air like smoke. "Best keep that door locked. Some of the men here, they work hard all day, drink hard all night. They see a woman with no man claiming her. They might get ideas." After Mrs. Morrison left, Lena sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress springs creaked under her weight. She'd been foolish to come, foolish to believe, Foolish to think this time would be different. But there was no going back. The money was spent. The bridges burned. She unpacked slowly, hanging her 2 dresses on nails someone had driven into the wall. The brown wool for every day, the blue cotton for Sundays, though she wondered if Red Hollow even had a church. Her father's knife went under the thin pillow. The Bible went on the windowsill where the morning light might find it. Night came early in December. By 5 o'clock, darkness had swallowed the town. Lena could hear life moving below boots on stairs, doors slamming, men's voices raised in laughter or argument. Someone was playing a fiddle badly. A woman's laugh, high and brittle, cut through the noise. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every footstep in the hall made her tense. The lock was worthless. She'd tested it and found it would give with barely any pressure. So she sat up, back against the wall, knife in her lap, watching the door. Around midnight, someone tried the handle. It rattled once, twice. Lena's grip tightened on the knife. "Anyone in there?" A man's voice, thick with drink. "Heard we got a new girl." She said nothing. After a moment, footsteps moved on down the hall, but sleep still wouldn't come. She dozed in train stations and wagon beds, but here, in this room that was supposed to be safety, her body refused to relax. The night stretched on. Lena counted the hours by the changing sounds, the saloon closing, the last drunk stumbling home, the brief quiet before dawn. When pale light finally crept through her window, she was still sitting against the wall, still holding the knife, eyes burning with exhaustion. She washed her face with water from the pitcher, cold enough to make her gasp. Her reflection in the cracked mirror above the washstand showed what the night had cost: dark circles, tight mouth, the kind of wariness that would take more than sleep to erase. Downstairs, the dining room was already half full of miners grabbing breakfast before their shift. They looked up when she entered, and she felt their eyes catalog her height, her broad shoulders, her lack of a wedding ring. Conversations paused, then resumed in lower tones. She took a table near the window. Away from the others, Mrs. Morrison brought coffee without being asked, thick and bitter and strong enough to strip paint. The breakfast was simple biscuits, gravy, a slice of salt pork. Lena ate mechanically, trying to make a plan. She needed work, and fast. She was halfway through her meal when a shadow fell across her table. A man stood there, tall enough that she didn't have to look up quite as far as usual. He wore a long duster coat, faded and patched but clean. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see a strong jaw, several days of stubble, and eyes the color of winter sky. He didn't stare at her body like the others. His gaze stayed on her face, steady and measuring. Then he reached up, took off his hat, and set it on her table. The gesture was slow, deliberate. "You shouldn't eat alone this morning," he said. His voice was low, roughened by smoke or dust or both. "Not your first morning in Red Hollow." She expected him to sit without invitation, the way men did when they thought a woman needed their protection, whether she wanted it or not. Instead, he waited, standing there with his hands loose at his sides, giving her the choice. "And why is that?" she asked. "Because they're all watching, trying to decide what kind of woman comes to a mining town alone. I sit with you now. They'll think twice before deciding wrong." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her since she'd arrived. Maybe since long before that. "Sit, then," she said. He pulled out the chair across from her, moving with the kind of careful grace that came from being big in a world full of fragile things. This close. She could smell wood smoke and pine tar on his clothes, the clean scent of cold air. "Calder Boone," he said. "Lena Gracewood." He nodded as if he already knew. "You sleep any—" The question surprised her. Not what brings you here or where's your man, but a simple inquiry about her rest. She found herself answering truthfully. "No. Figured. That room at the end of the hall. The lock's been broke for 3 years. Mrs. Morrison keeps meaning to fix it. He took a sip of coffee from the cup Mrs. Morrison brought him without being asked. You got that look the one folks get when they've been watching doors all night. Lena's hand had moved instinctively toward where her knife would be, then stopped. He noticed the gesture. She could tell, but he didn't comment. You know the town well? She asked. Well enough. Been here 4 winters. He paused, seemed to consider his words. Heard you were supposed to marry the Morrison boy. Heat crept up her neck. News travels fast. Small town, not much else to talk about. He turned his coffee cup in his hands, studying the chip on the rim. Samuel Morrison was a fool, but then, he always was. Town's better off without him. It wasn't quite comfort, but it wasn't pity either. Lena found she could breathe a little easier. I need work, she said, deciding directness was best. I can cook, clean, sew. I can read and figure. I can do most things that need doing. Calder studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded toward the end of town. There's an old seamstress shop behind the church. Woman who ran it died last spring. Her nephew owns it now but doesn't know what to do with it. Still has her sewing machine. Fabric. Notions. This time of year, folks need winter mending coats, blankets, boots. Might be he'd rent it reasonable to someone who could make use of it. Hope, small and tentative, stirred in Lena's chest. Would he rent to a woman alone? He might, if someone vouched for you. Calder stood, picking up his hat from the table. I've got business at the mine today, but tomorrow, if you'd like, I could introduce you. She looked up at him, trying to read his angle. Men didn't help without wanting something. But his gray eyes were steady, patient, waiting for her answer without pushing. Why? She asked. He settled his hat back on his head, taking his time with the answer. Because I know what it's like to not fit quite right, and because Red Hollow could use someone who knows how to make things last through winter. After he left, Lena finished her breakfast. The other diners had gone back to their conversations, the entertainment of the new arrival temporarily set aside. But something had shifted. She'd been marked, somehow, by Calder Boone's attention, claimed in a way that had nothing to do with possession and everything to do with protection. That night, she still sat up with her knife, but when footsteps passed her door, they didn't pause. And when dawn came, she'd managed an hour of sleep, maybe 2. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The second night came too soon. Lena climbed the narrow stairs to her room, each step heavier than the last. The hallway seemed darker than before, the broken chair casting strange shadows in the lamplight from below. She'd spent the day walking through town, looking for work, finding only shaken heads and suspicious glances. The room felt smaller when she entered, colder too. She'd left the window cracked for air, but now the December wind pushed through, carrying the acrid smell of coal smoke and something else, cheap whiskey and unwashed bodies from the saloon 2 buildings over. She tested the lock again, hoping somehow it had fixed itself. The mechanism turned loosely in the door, barely catching. A child could force it open. Mrs. Morrison's words echoed. Some of the men here, they might get ideas. Lena wedged the broken chair from the hallway under her doorknob. It wasn't much, but it might buy her time to grab the knife if someone tried to enter. She lit the oil lamp, keeping the wick low to save fuel. The yellow light made the water stains on the walls look like reaching fingers. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She'd eaten only the morning breakfast, stretching her few coins as far as possible. But hunger was an old companion, one she'd known during the lean months back east when factory work dried up and her size made her unsuitable for the domestic positions other women found. She sat on the bed, still wearing her boots and coat. The knife lay across her lap, her father's initials worn smooth on the handle. He'd carried it through the war, through battles she'd only heard about in his nightmares. Sometimes, Lena girl, he'd said once. The only thing standing between you and harm is your willingness to defend yourself. The inn settled into its nighttime rhythm. Doors slammed. Boots clomped on stairs. Men's voices rose and fell like tidewater. Someone was singing off-key, the words slurred beyond recognition. A couple argued in the room next door, their voices sharp through the thin walls. Around 10 o'clock, the footsteps started in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. They paused at each door. She could hear the boards creak under the weight. Her hand tightened on the knife handle. The steps stopped outside her room. The doorknob rattled. Once, twice, then harder, the whole door shaking in its frame. Open up. The voice was different from last night. Younger, more insistent. Heard Morrison's woman was in here. Want to see what California boy passed up. Lena said nothing. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. The chair under the doorknob held, though she could see it shift with each push against the door. Come on, sweetheart. Just want to talk. Buy you a drink, maybe? The lie was so transparent it might have been funny in daylight. But here, in the dark, with only a broken lock between them, nothing was amusing. More footsteps in the hall. Leave it be, Watson. A different voice, older, tired. Boone was asking after her today. You don't want that trouble. Boone doesn't own every woman in town. No, but he's got a way of making men regret their choices. Remember what happened to Thompson? The pressure on the door ceased. Watson, she filed the name away, muttered something crude, but moved on. The older voice followed, their footsteps fading toward the stairs. Lena didn't relax. Couldn't. The mention of Calder Boone had driven them off. But what happened when his name lost its power, when the men grew brave with whiskey or desperate with loneliness? She stood, paced the small room. 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back. The floor had a loose board near the washstand that squeaked with her weight. She memorized it, in case she needed to move in darkness later. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock. The inn quieted some, but not enough for sleep. Every sound made her start a door closing, a cough from another room, the wind rattling her window. She tried sitting in the chair, but it put her back to the door. Tried lying on the bed fully clothed, but felt too vulnerable horizontal. Finally, she took the thin blanket and pillow to the corner farthest from the door. With her back pressed against the walls, she could see both the door and window. The knife stayed in her right hand, ready. The lamp oil ran low around 3. She let it die rather than waste more. Darkness pressed in, broken only by faint moonlight through the dirty window. Her eyes adjusted slowly, picking out shapes: the bed frame, the washstand, the door that seemed to pulse with threat. She might have dozed. It was hard to tell. The exhaustion made everything feel distant and too close at the same time. But suddenly she was fully alert, every nerve firing. Someone was in the hallway again, moving quietly this time, trying not to make the boards creak. The footsteps paused at her door. No rattling this time. Instead, she heard the soft scrape of metal on metal. Someone was working the lock with tools. Lena rose silently, knife ready. The chair under the doorknob wouldn't stop someone determined to pick the lock. She moved toward the door, careful to avoid the squeaky board. The scraping continued. Then a soft click. The lock had given way. Only the chair stood between her and whoever was outside. The door pushed inward, slowly, meeting the resistance of the chair. "Damn," a voice whispered. This one she didn't recognize. "Blocked it." "Push harder," another whisper, younger. Lena's mind raced. If she screamed, would anyone come, or would they just figure she was getting what a woman alone deserved? The chair scraped against the floor as the door pushed harder. "That's enough." The new voice came from further down the hall, deep, calm, with an edge like winter wind. She recognized it, Calder Boone. The pushing stopped. "We weren't doing nothing. Boone, just checking on the lady." "At 3 in the morning, with lockpicks." The floorboards creaked as Calder moved closer. "Get out. Don't come back to this floor." You ain't the law here. No, but I'm worse than law. I'm patient. I remember faces. And I've got all winter to make you regret testing me. Silence stretched tight as wire. Then footsteps retreated, quick and stumbling. 2 sets, maybe 3. They clattered down the stairs like spooked horses. Lena stayed frozen, knife still raised. She heard Calder's boots approach her door. Miss Grace Wood. His voice was quiet, meant not to wake other guests. You all right in there? She had to clear her throat twice before words would come. Yes. Going to push something against your door, something heavier than that chair. Don't be alarmed. She heard dragging, grunting effort. Something solid thunked against her door, the old wardrobe from the end of the hall. She guessed. That'll hold till morning, he said. Try to rest some. His footsteps moved away, but they didn't go down the stairs. Instead, she heard them settle at the far end of the hall, a soft thump like someone sitting on the floor, back to the wall. He was standing guard. Lena sank back to her corner, legs suddenly shaky. The knife trembled in her grip. She'd been ready to fight, ready to draw blood if needed, but she hadn't had to, because of him. She didn't understand it. Men didn't protect without payment. They didn't stand guard without expectation. Yet there he was, spending his night on a cold hallway floor so she could close her eyes. The rest of the darkness passed differently. Still tense, still wary, but not alone. Occasionally she heard him shift position, clear his throat, strike a match for his pipe. Small sounds that said, someone's watching, someone cares if you wake tomorrow. When dawn light finally touched her window, Lena had managed maybe 2 hours of broken sleep. Her body ached from sitting on the floor, and her hand had cramped around the knife handle. But she was untouched, unharmed. She rose stiffly, washed her face with the last of the water in the pitcher. Her reflection looked hollow-eyed, but intact. The blue dress today, she needed to look respectable if Calder truly meant to introduce her to the seamstress shop owner. When she opened her door, pushing hard against the wardrobe, she found Calder still there. He sat with his back to the wall, long legs stretched out, hat tilted over his eyes. But he stirred when her door scraped open, instantly alert. "Morning," he said, standing with a wince that said his night had been no more comfortable than hers. "You stayed all night." "Said I would, didn't I?" He stretched, joints popping. In the morning light, she could see him better. Weathered face, lines around his eyes from squinting into sun and snow, hands scarred from work, but his eyes were clear, steady, kind. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He considered her for a moment, then bent to help her move the wardrobe. Because nobody should have to hold a knife all night just to sleep safe. Because this town needs to learn that some lines don't get crossed. And because... He paused, seemed to weigh his words. "Because you remind me of someone." "Who?" "Myself. First winter here." He gave the wardrobe a final push, clearing her doorway. "Didn't fit right. Too big, too quiet, too different. Town tried to make me prove myself with fists and blood. Got tired of it. Figured I'd save you the same trouble." They stood in the narrow hallway, morning light struggling through a dirty window at the far end. Lena found herself really looking at him for the first time, not just the size or the strength, but the careful way he moved, the patience in his manner. A man who'd learned to be gentle because he knew his own power. "Thank you," she said, meaning it down to her bones. He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that seemed old-fashioned even for Red Hollow. "Get some breakfast, then we'll see about that shop. And tonight," he paused, frowning, "tonight we'll figure out something better. This can't go on." He left her standing there, his boots heavy on the stairs. Lena looked at her door, the broken lock, the chair she'd used as a barricade. One more night like this might break her. But maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face it alone. The morning air bit sharp as Lena followed Calder through Red Hollow's muddy streets. He walked ahead, his long stride forcing her to quicken her pace, though she noticed he checked himself occasionally, slowing to let her catch up. The town looked different in daylight, less menacing but more worn, like a coat mended too many times. The seamstress shop sat behind the Methodist church, a narrow building that seemed to lean against its neighbor for support. Frost covered the windows, and a faded sign reading Mrs. Eliza Hartley, Fine Sewing and Mending, hung crooked above the door. "Edgar Hartley owns it now," Calder said, producing a key from his pocket. "His aunt's nephew, lives in Denver, only comes through twice a year to collect what rent he can." "You have a key." "I look after the building, make sure the roof doesn't cave in, keep squatters out." He worked the lock, shoulder against the door when it stuck. "Edgar's not a bad sort, just doesn't know what to do with the place." The door opened onto darkness that smelled of dust and old cotton. Calder struck a match, found a lamp on a table near the entrance. The light revealed a room frozen in time bolts of fabric still on shelves, thread spools lined up by color, a Singer sewing machine sitting under a dust cloth like a sleeping creature. Lena moved through the space slowly, running her fingers along the fabric bolts. Good wool, some of it, cotton prints, even a length of blue silk that caught the lamplight. Her hands itched to work with it, to create something useful from these abandoned materials. "How long has it been empty?" she asked. "Since April. Mrs. Hartley took sick sudden, gone in 3 days." Calder leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore. Town's been making do, women mending their own, ordering from catalogs when they can afford it. But winter's hard here. Things wear out fast. Lena uncovered the sewing machine, checking its mechanism. Well-oiled, barely used. Mrs. Hartley had taken care of her tools. What would Edgar Hartley want for rent? "That's between you and him, but I might suggest terms he'd find reasonable." Calder moved to the back room, gesturing for her to follow. "Living quarters here, nothing fancy, but it's got its own entrance. Lock that works." The back room was small but clean, a bed with a proper frame, a cook stove, a table and 2 chairs. A window looked out onto the churchyard where wooden crosses stood in crooked rows, but the door solid oak with an iron bolt that was what made Lena's chest loosen. "I could write Edgar today." Calder continued. "Telegraph takes 3 days to Denver and back. Might have you set up by week's end." "Why are you doing this?" Lena faced him in the small room. "You don't know me. Don't owe me anything." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the churchyard. "You ever watch how people treat a horse that's been broke wrong skittish? Mean, won't let nobody close. Everybody says it's a bad horse, needs a harder hand. But sometimes all it needs is one person to be patient, to show it that not every hand holds a whip." "I'm not a horse." "No." He turned from the window. "You're a woman who sat up all night with a knife because this town showed you its worst side first. Figure you deserve to see something better." The words hung between them, simple and honest. Lena found herself blinking hard, unused to kindness without conditions. "I don't have much money," she admitted. "Enough for maybe 2 weeks at the inn." "Edgar won't want money up front. He'll want the place used, kept up. Probably take a percentage of earnings instead of flat rent. Mrs. Hartley did well here. You could too." They returned to the front room. Lena lifted the dust cloth entirely off the sewing machine, revealing its black iron beauty. She sat at the bench, feet finding the pedals by instinct, even without thread. The machine hummed when she worked it, smooth and willing. "I'll write that letter," Calder said. "Meantime, might be some folks willing to advance you work. Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house has tablecloths need hemming. The miners are always needing patches, reinforced seams. Pay wouldn't be much, but it'd be something." "And tonight?" Lena asked, not looking at him. "That room at the inn." "I'll handle it." His voice carried that same steady certainty. "You focus on getting started here. Let me worry about the rest." He left her alone in the shop. Lena sat at the sewing machine, hands resting on the cool metal. Around her, the abandoned materials waited patiently. She could see it women coming in with worn clothes, leaving with garments that would last another season. Children needing let-down hems and reinforced knees. Miners requiring patches that wouldn't give way underground. She stood, began taking inventory. 3 bolts of good wool, dark and practical. Cotton in various weights. Thread enough to last months if she was careful. Needles, pins. Scissors that needed sharpening but would serve. Pattern books from Godey's and Peterson's, only a year out of date. By the time Calder returned, she'd cleaned the front counter and begun sorting the thread by weight rather than color, a more practical system for a mining town. Mrs. Patterson says she'll bring the tablecloths tomorrow, he reported. And I've got something else. He set a bundle on the counter, unwrapped it to reveal several shirts and a coat. Mine. Been meaning to get them fixed up. Lena examined the garments. The shirts needed new buttons, reinforced cuffs. The coat had a tear along one seam, easily mended. When do you need them? No rush. Whenever you get set up proper. He rewrapped the bundle. About tonight, I've arranged something. Mrs. Chen runs a boarding house for the Chinese workers, far end of town. She's got a room clean, safe. Her sons keep watch, and nobody bothers the Chinese section after dark. Afraid of them, mostly. She'll take me, a white woman. Mrs. Chen's practical. Empty room doesn't pay. And she remembers when nobody else would rent to her family. You treat her fair, she'll do the same. It was irregular, maybe even scandalous. But scandal seemed a small price for a door that locked and a night's sleep without fear. There's a wagon outside. Calder continued. Your things from the inn are already loaded. No sense going back there. Mrs. Morrison will want her rent paid through the week. Told her you found other arrangements. His gray eyes held a glint of humor. She didn't argue. Think she was relieved to avoid trouble. They loaded the few supplies from the shop that Lena wanted to study: pattern books, thread samples, measuring tapes. The wagon driver, a silent man with hands gnarled from rains, didn't comment on their destination. The Chinese section of Red Hollow was both part of and separate from the town. The buildings were the same rough lumber, but red paper lanterns hung from doorways, and the air smelled of unfamiliar spices. Men in loose shirts and wide hats paused their work to watch the wagon pass. Mrs. Chen's boarding house stood 2 stories tall, narrow windows watching the street like careful eyes. The woman herself was small but solid, gray threading through black hair pulled severely back. She studied Lena with the same measuring look Lena had seen in her own mirror, a woman who'd learned to assess threat quickly. Mr. Boone says you sew, Mrs. Chen said, her English careful but clear. Yes. Good. My boarders need mending. Work for room and board, if you want. Extra for pay. She named a sum that was fair, maybe even generous. I'll have the shop soon, if all goes well. Lena said, but until then, yes, thank you. The room was small but clean, as promised. The bed had a thick quilt that smelled of cedar. The door had not 1 but 2 locks, and bars for the windows that could be secured from inside. From somewhere below came the sound of cooking, voices speaking in Chinese, life moving on its own terms. Dinner at 6, Mrs. Chen said. You eat with us or in your room. Your choice. Bathhouse out back. Women's hours posted on the door. My sons, Li Wei and Li Chen, they watch at night. Nobody comes up who doesn't belong. After she left, Lena sat on the bed, her bed. At least for now. No knife needed, no chair against the door. Just a room where she could close her eyes without fear. Through the window, she could see Calder's wagon pulling away. He'd tipped his hat when he left, that same old-fashioned gesture. No lingering, no expectation of thanks or payment. Just a man who decided she deserved better than fear. That evening, she ate in the common room. The other boarders, all Chinese men, were polite but distant. The food was unfamiliar but filling. Rice and vegetables with flavors she couldn't name. Mrs. Chen's son sat near the door. Young men with watchful eyes and the kind of stillness that suggested violence held in careful check. When she climbed the stairs to her room, no footsteps followed. When she closed her door, it stayed closed. And when she finally lay down on the narrow bed, still fully clothed out of habit, her hand didn't reach for the knife. She slept, deep and dreamless, the kind of rest that comes from safety. And in the morning, when she woke to strange voices and cooking smells and red lantern light through her window, she felt something she hadn't felt since boarding the train west. Hope, small and fragile as new thread, but strong enough to build on, strong enough to begin. 3 days had passed at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, 3 nights of unbroken sleep, 3 mornings of waking without fear. Lena had mended 17 shirts for the Chinese miners, hemmed Mrs. Patterson's tablecloths, and begun taking in work from others who'd heard a seamstress was available again. The telegram from Denver arrived on the 4th day. Calder brought it to the shop where Lena was working, having received the key from Edgar Hartley's response. The terms were better than she'd hoped: 20% of earnings instead of flat rent, use of all materials left behind, and the living quarters included. "Told you Edgar was reasonable," Calder said, watching her read the telegram twice to be sure. "Man knows he's lucky to have someone willing to take the place on." Lena set the paper down carefully, afraid her shaking hands might tear it. "It's official then. I have work, a place." "You have a start," Calder corrected. "The rest you'll build yourself." She'd been organizing the shop all morning, creating order from Mrs. Hartley's abandoned chaos. Calder had stopped by to check on the roof, he said, though the roof seemed fine to her. He'd ended up fixing a squeaky floorboard and adjusting the door so it closed properly. Now, late afternoon sun slanted through the clean windows, showing dust motes dancing in the air. Calder stood by the counter, hat in his hands, looking like he had something more to say. "I brought your work," he said finally, indicating the bundle of his clothes she'd mended. "What do I owe you?" She named a fair price, the same she'd charge any customer. He paid without haggling, counting out coins precisely. Then he didn't leave. "Something else?" she asked. He turned his hat in his hands, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his way of thinking through words. "Wanted to make sure you were settling in all right. At Mrs. Chen's." "It's good. Safe." She paused, studying his face. "Though I wonder how long the town will tolerate me living in the Chinese section." "Let them wonder. Long as you're safe, their opinions don't matter." "Don't they?" Lena moved to the window, looking out at the church next door. "A woman's reputation matters in a small town. I've already broken rules coming here alone, being left by Samuel Morrison, now living where I do." "You're surviving," Calder said quietly. "That matters more than rules." She turned from the window to find him closer than before, though she hadn't heard him move. This near, she could see flecks of darker blue in his gray eyes, like storm clouds gathering. "Why do you care if I survive?" The question had been building for days. He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My sister came west 5 years ago. Sarah, tall like you, strong, came to marry a man who'd promised her the world in letters. Found out he already had a wife back east." Lena's breath caught. What happened to her? She tried to make it work, found a job cooking at a logging camp, but the men there... He stopped, jaw tightening. She lasted 2 months before one of them decided he'd waited long enough for her to choose him willing. She fought hard, but she was alone. And he wasn't. The shop felt very quiet. Outside, she could hear children playing in the churchyard, their voices high and carefree. "I'm sorry," Lena said softly. "Found her letter telling me about it 3 months after she died. Pneumonia, The doctor said, but I know better. She gave up, stopped fighting. He looked at her directly then. When I saw you that first morning, holding yourself so careful, watching every man like a threat, I saw her. Saw what might have been if someone had just stood by her those first hard weeks. I'm not your sister. Calder. No, you're not. He moved then, slow and deliberate, reaching into his coat. What he pulled out made Lena step back in surprise, a thick wool blanket. Military issue from the look of it. Well maintained despite its age. Nights are getting colder, he said, setting it on the counter. Thought you might need this. Before she could respond, he was at the door, but there he paused, one hand on the frame. I'm not looking for anything from you, Lena. Not gratitude, not affection, nothing you're not willing to give free and clear. Just want you to know you're not alone here. That's all. He was gone before she could form words. Lena stood in the empty shop, staring at the blanket. It was practical, warm, exactly what she needed. But somehow it felt like more than that, like a promise, like protection offered without chains. That evening, a knock came at her shop door just as she was closing. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, along with two other women. Lena recognized one as the minister's wife, the other as someone she'd seen at the general store. We heard you were open for business, Mrs. Patterson said when Lena let them in. Her tone was cautious, testing. Thought we'd come see what you might do for us. The women examined her work carefully, the mended shirts displayed on the counter. A dress she'd altered for better fit. The minister's wife, Mrs. Donnelly, fingered the neat stitches with approval. This is fine work, she admitted. As good as Mrs. Hartley's, maybe better. I have 3 daughters, the third woman said. She was young, tired-looking, with the worn hands of a miner's wife. Growing fast, their dresses all need letting out, and my eyes aren't what they were. They negotiated prices, set appointments. After they left, Lena had a week's worth of work scheduled. Word would spread now the women's network was faster than any telegraph. By Sunday, she'd likely have more work than she could handle alone. She was locking up when Calder appeared again, stepping out of the shadows so quietly she nearly dropped her keys. Sorry, he said. Didn't mean to startle, just wanted to walk you back to Mrs. Chen's. Gets dark early now. I can manage. I know you can. He fell into step beside her anyway. But why should you have to? They walked in comfortable silence through the town. A few people noticed them, and Lena saw curtains twitch as they passed. By tomorrow, everyone would know Calder Boone had walked the new seamstress home. This will start talk, she warned. Let them talk. It might damage your reputation, being seen with the woman who lives in the Chinese section. He actually smiled at that, a quick flash of humor that transformed his weathered face. My reputation could use some damage. Too many folks think I'm made of stone. At Mrs. Chen's door, he stopped. The evening was cold enough that their breath clouded between them. From inside came the sounds of dinner, voices mixing English and Chinese, life carrying on. Thank you, Lena said, for the blanket, for everything. He reached up then, slow enough that she could have stepped back. His hand touched her shoulder briefly, the weight of it warm through her coat. You're welcome. He studied her face in the lamplight. You're looking better, less like you're waiting for a fight. I slept last night, all night through. Good. His hand dropped away. That's good. He started to leave, then turned back. In one smooth motion, he took off his hat and set it on the doorstep beside her. What are you doing? Leaving my hat. Anyone comes by, they'll see it. Know you're not alone. He touched his bare head, almost embarrassed. Old habit from the cattle drives. You leave your hat, means you're coming back. Means that spot's claimed. Calder. Just for tonight. While folks are still figuring out you belong here. He was already backing away. I'll fetch it in the morning. Lena watched him disappear into the darkness, then looked down at the hat. It was worn but well cared for. The band darkened by years of handling. Such a simple thing, but in a town like Red Hollow, symbols mattered. She picked it up, carried it inside. Mrs. Chen saw it in her hands and nodded approvingly. "Smart man," was all she said. That night, Lena hung the hat on the peg by her door where anyone passing in the hall would see it. She wrapped herself in the military blanket that smelled faintly of pine smoke and leather. And when she heard footsteps in the hall boarders returning late from the mines, she didn't reach for her knife. The hat on the peg said what needed saying. This woman is accounted for. This woman has someone watching. For the first time since arriving in Red Hollow, Lena Gracewood fell asleep smiling. The rhythm of work settled over Lena like a familiar coat. 2 weeks had passed since she'd opened the shop, and already her days had found their pattern. Morning light through the windows, the hum of the sewing machine, the whisper of thread through fabric. Women came with their mending, their alterations, their winter preparations. Children stood still while she marked hems, fidgeting only when their mothers looked away. Calder had become part of the rhythm too, though she couldn't say exactly how. He never entered the shop during working hours that would have been improper, would have set tongues wagging more than they already did, but in the late afternoons, when the last customer had gone and she was tidying up, she'd often see him sitting on the bench outside. He never knocked, never called out, just sat there, smoking his pipe, watching the street. Sometimes she'd join him, bringing 2 cups of the strong coffee Mrs. Chen had taught her to make. They'd sit in comfortable silence, watching the town wind down toward evening. "You're not much for talking," she observed one afternoon, settling beside him on the bench. "Never saw much point in filling the air with words." He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "You learn more listening. What do you hear when you listen to Red Hollow?" He considered the question, eyes on the miners trudging home, the women hurrying to finish errands before dark. "Fear, mostly. Everyone's afraid of something. Afraid the mine will play out, afraid winter will be too hard, afraid of being alone." "What are you afraid of?" The question surprised him. She could see it in the way his hand paused, pipe halfway to his mouth. "Used to be afraid of ending up like my father, mean drunk who couldn't keep his fists to himself. Then Sarah died, and I was afraid of not being able to protect the people who mattered. And now?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Now I'm afraid of wanting something I've got no right to want." Before she could ask what he meant, "Mrs." Donnelly appeared around the corner, arms full of fabric. The moment broke like thin ice, leaving Lena wondering if she'd imagined the weight in his words. That evening, instead of walking her home, Calder had a different request. "There's a barn dance Saturday night," he said, hat in his hands in that way he had when he was uncertain. "Nothing fancy. Miners and their families. Mostly music, dancing, probably too much whiskey by the end." "Are you asking me to go?" Lena kept her voice carefully neutral, though her heart had picked up speed. "I'm asking if you'd consider it. Might be good for folks to see you there. See you're part of the town now, not just passing through." It was practical, the way he framed it, but she heard what he didn't say, that he wanted her there, wanted to be the one walking in with her. "I don't dance," she said. "Never learned, never had cause to." "Don't have to dance, just have to be there." He settled his hat back on his head. "Think about it." Saturday came faster than expected. Lena had tried on both her dresses a dozen times, finally settling on the blue cotton with a new collar she'd made from some lace she'd found in Mrs. Hartley's supplies. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well-fitted, and that would have to do. Mrs. Chen helped with her hair, pinning it up in a style that softened the angles of her face. "You look nice," she said, stepping back to survey her work. "That man of yours will be pleased." "He's not my man," Lena protested. "Mrs. Chen just smiled, the kind of knowing smile that made Lena's cheeks warm. Calder arrived at sunset, dressed in clean clothes, hair still damp from washing. He'd shaved, she noticed, revealing a strong jaw usually hidden by stubble. When he saw her, he stopped mid-step, something flickering across his face too fast to name. "You look," he cleared his throat. "You look fine, Miss Gracewood. Real fine." The barn sat at the edge of town, big enough to hold most of Red Hollow, and the doors were thrown wide. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over the crowd already gathering. A makeshift band fiddle, guitar, and accordion was tuning up in the corner. The smell of sawdust and apple cider filled the air. Heads turned when they entered. Conversation stuttered, then resumed in lower tones. Lena felt the weight of their attention, the calculations behind their eyes. But Calder's hand at her elbow was steady, guiding her through the crowd with quiet authority. "Let them look," he murmured. "Give them something worth seeing." They found a spot along the wall where they could watch the dancing start. Couples formed up, boots shuffling on the wooden floor. The music was lively, infectious, and Lena found her foot tapping despite herself. "Changed your mind about dancing?" Calder asked, noticing. No, just appreciating the music. A lie, perhaps. Part of her wondered what it would feel like to move to the music, to let Calder's hands guide her through the steps. But that was foolishness. She was too tall, too awkward, too unused to such things. "Miss Gracewood," a small voice piped up. Lucy Patterson, one of the children whose dresses she'd let down, appeared at her side. "You came—" "Hello, Lucy." Lena smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. "Are you dancing tonight?" "Mama says I'm too young, but next year for sure." The child grabbed Lena's hand. "Come see Mama brought the tablecloth you fixed. She's showing everyone how nice it looks now." Before Lena could protest, she was being pulled away from Calder into a group of women, Mrs. Patterson was indeed showing off the tablecloth, pointing out the invisible mending Lena had done on a tear. "Best work we've seen since Mrs." Hartley passed. "Mrs." Patterson declared. "Maybe better. And so quick, too." Other women chimed in with their own praise. A dress lengthened here, a coat reinforced there. Without quite knowing how, Lena found herself in the center of their circle, accepted in a way she hadn't expected. "My William's growing so fast," one woman lamented. "All his shirts are too small now." "Bring them by," Lena heard herself saying. "I can add panels to the sides, make them last another season." The talk turned to children, weather, the coming winter, normal talk, the kind women shared when they recognized each other as part of the same community. Lena felt something ease in her chest, a knot she hadn't known was there. When she finally extracted herself and looked for Calder, she found him across the room, cornered by a group of minors. But his eyes found hers immediately, and the small smile he gave her made warmth bloom under her ribs. The evening wore on. The dancing grew more enthusiastic as the whiskey made rounds. Children played between the adults' legs, and more than once, Lena found herself catching a tumbling youngster or retying a hair ribbon. "You're good with them," Calder observed when they found themselves together again. "The children. They're honest, no pretense. I appreciate that. Most folks find honesty uncomfortable. Most folks haven't had to rely on reading people's true intentions for survival." He studied her face in the lantern light. "No, I suppose they haven't." A commotion near the door drew their attention. 3 men had entered, already well into their cups from the sound of their voices. Lena recognized one Watson, who'd tried her door that second night at the inn. His eyes found her across the room, narrowed with recognition and something meaner. He said something to his companions that made them laugh, an ugly sound that cut through the music. "Ignore them," Calder said quietly, but she felt him shift, positioning himself slightly in front of her. Watson wasn't inclined to be ignored. He wove through the crowd, his friends trailing behind like hungry dogs. When he reached them, The smell of cheap whiskey preceded him like a wave. "Well now," he slurred. "The seamstress and her watchdog. Ain't that cozy? Move along, Watson." Calder's voice was calm, almost bored. "You're drunk." "Not so drunk I can't see what's what." Watson's bleary eyes fixed on Lena. "Playing lady now? Are we living with the Chinese? Taking Boone's charity? We all know what kind of woman does that." The music had stopped. A circle of silence expanded around them as people sensed trouble brewing. Lena's hands clenched in her skirts, but she kept her chin up, meeting Watson's stare without flinching. "The kind who works for her living," she said clearly. "The kind who pays her debts and keeps her word. What kind of man tries to break into a woman's room at night?" Watson's face flushed darker. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm calling you exactly what you are." He moved faster than a drunk man should have been able to, hand reaching for her arm. But Calder was faster. His fist connected with Watson's jaw with a sound like a ham hitting a cutting board. Watson went down hard, sawdust puffing up around him. His friends started forward, but stopped when Calder straightened to his full height, hands loose at his sides in a fighter's ready stance. "Anyone else want to insult Miss Gracewood?" His voice carried throughout the barn. "Want to question her character, her right to be here because I've got all night and two fists that haven't seen enough use lately?" Nobody moved. Watson groaned from the floor, hand to his jaw. His friends helped him up, half carrying him toward the door. At the threshold, Watson turned back, shooting a look of pure venom at Lena. "This ain't over," he mumbled through what sounded like broken teeth. "Yes," Calder said simply. "It is." After they left, the music started again, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. People went back to dancing, though many shot glances at Calder and Lena. The violence had shifted something in the air, made a statement that would be discussed in every household tomorrow. "I should go," Lena said quietly. "This was supposed to help my reputation, not—" "Stay." Calder's hand found hers, gentle but firm. "You run now. They'll think you've got reason to. Stay, hold your head up, show them Watson was wrong." So she stayed through another hour of music and dancing, stayed while women approached her with small smiles and quiet words of support, stayed until the evening wound down and families began gathering children and coats. As they walked back to Mrs. Chen's, the night air sharp and clear, Lena finally spoke what had been building in her chest all evening. "You defended me." "Yes. You could have been hurt. Watson had friends. Watson's a coward who only feels brave when women are alone and doors don't lock proper." Calder's voice held an edge of remaining anger. Men like that need reminding sometimes. They reached Mrs. Chen's door. Inside, warm light spilled from windows, promising safety and rest. But Lena found herself reluctant to go in, to end this night that had shown her something new about her place in Red Hollow. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up for me, for making me go tonight, for—" She gestured helplessly. "Everything." Calder stepped closer, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. The possibility hung between them like a held breath. Then he reached up, touched her cheek with fingertips still rough from the fight. "You're worth defending. Lena Gracewood. Worth fighting for. Don't let anyone tell you different." He left then, walking backward a few steps so he could tip his hat to her before turning away. Lena stood on the doorstep, hand to her cheek where his touch still lingered, watching until he disappeared into the darkness. Inside, she found Mrs. Chen waiting with tea and knowing eyes. "Good night?" the older woman asked. Lena considered the question the acceptance from the women, the confrontation with Watson, Calder's fist defending her honor, his touch gentle on her skin. "Yes," she said finally, surprised to find it true. "A very good night." The request came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by young Tommy Chen, one of Mrs. Chen's nephews. Lena was pressing a coat when the boy appeared at her shop door, breathless from running. "Mister, Boone asks if you can come," Tommy said between gasps. "To the northern camp. Says to bring your heavy cloak and overnight bag." Lena set down the iron, alarm flickering through her. "Is he hurt?" "No, miss. He's got business there. Says he needs someone who can figure accounts and maybe do some mending for the men." The northern lumber camp. She'd heard of it a day's ride into the mountains where crews cut timber for the mine supports. Rough place. All men except for the camp cook. Not somewhere a respectable woman went alone. But Calder wasn't asking her to go alone. "Tell him I need an hour to arrange things," she said finally. Tommy nodded and ran off. Lena stood in her shop, hands pressed flat on the counter, trying to slow her heartbeat. This was different from their careful afternoon coffees. Different from him walking her home. This was public, declarative. This was trust of a different kind. She packed methodically. Her sewing kit, because there would surely be mending. Her ledger and pencils, if he truly needed help with accounts. Clean undergarments. Her brown wool dress. The military blanket he'd given her. At the last moment, she added her father's knife, sliding it into her boot. Calder arrived with a wagon and 2 horses. Dressed for travel in his long coat and wide-brimmed hat, he helped her up to the seat without comment on her luggage, though she saw his eyes note the overnight bag. "I appreciate this," he said as they started out of town. "Camp foreman's been poorly, and the lumber accounts are a mess. Figured you might make sense of them better than I could. And the mending. 20 men working hard all winter, no woman to tend their clothes. They're starting to look like scarecrows." He guided the horses around a rough patch in the road. "I'll pay you fair for your time. This isn't charity." "I didn't think it was." They rode in comfortable silence as Red Hollow fell behind. The road wound upward into pine forest, the air growing colder and thinner. Snow appeared in patches, then blankets, until the whole world was white and green and silent, except for the creak of wagon wheels. "Why me?" Lena asked eventually. "Surely there are others who could help with accounts." Calder was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I trust you, because you'll see what needs doing and do it without fuss, and because," he glanced at her sideways, "because I wanted your company on the ride." Heat bloomed in her chest despite the cold air. "That's honest. Figure honesty's about all I got to offer." They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the lunch misses. Chen had packed cold chicken, bread, dried apples. Calder built a small fire to heat coffee, the smoke rising straight in the still air. They sat on a fallen log, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Tell me about the camp," Lena said. "It's rough. Men work sunrise to sunset, cutting and hauling, sleep in bunkhouses, eat in the common hall. Foreman tries to keep order, but they're a wild bunch when the mood takes them." He poured coffee into tin cups. "They'll be curious about you. Some might say things they shouldn't. I've handled worse than lumberjacks' comments." "I know you have." His voice carried something that might have been pride. "Just want you prepared." They reached the camp as afternoon shadows grew long. It was exactly as rough as Calder had described, a collection of log buildings huddled in a clearing, smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of axes ringing in the distance. Men stopped work to stare as the wagon rolled in. The foreman, a grizzled man named Hutchins, was indeed poorly. He lay on a cot in the camp office, face flushed with fever, trying to make sense of papers spread on a makeshift desk. "Thank God," he croaked when he saw Calder. "Can't make heads or tails of these numbers. Company man's coming end of the week, wants accounts settled." Lena moved past Calder to feel Hutchins's forehead, burning hot. "When did the fever start?" 3 days back, maybe 4. He tried to sit up. Failed. "Them accounts will be handled," she said firmly. "But first, you need willow bark tea and rest. Where's your cook?" The cook, a tough old bird named Murphy, was located and set to making tea. Lena organized the sick room with quiet efficiency, fresh bedding, window cracked for air, water within reach. Only then did she turn to the scattered papers. "Lord Almighty," she muttered, seeing the mess. "Did anyone here learn penmanship?" Calder smiled. "That's why we need you." She commandeered the desk, sorting papers into piles, receipts, work logs, supply orders, wages. The system. Once she found it, wasn't complicated, just neglected, confused by too many hands trying to help. "I'll need to work through dinner," she told Calder. "This is at least a day's work to sort properly." "I'll have Murphy bring you something." He paused at the door. "The men usually gather in the common hall evenings. You don't have to join, but if you wanted to look at their mending needs..." She understood. Show herself. Let them see she was there for legitimate work, not as some camp follower. "I'll come after I finish the supply orders." The accounts slowly took shape under her hands. The camp was profitable, but barely. Expenses eating into lumber sales. She found errors, supplies double-ordered, wages miscalculated, payments to the company recorded wrong. By the time she'd corrected everything, full dark had fallen. The common hall blazed with lamplight and male voices. 20-odd men sat at long tables, finishing their dinner. Conversation died when she entered, every eye turning her way. "Evening," she said clearly. "Mr. Boone suggested some of you might need mending done. I'll be taking orders after you finish eating." Silence stretched. Then one brave soul, barely more than a boy, held up a shirt with a sleeve hanging by threads. "I got 3 like this, ma'am. Keep catching them on branches." That broke the dam. Soon she had a pile of damaged clothes and a list of needed repairs. The men were respectful, almost shy, calling her ma'am and miss and keeping their eyes politely averted. Calder's presence in the corner might have helped, but she sensed it was more than that. Working men knew the value of someone who could make things last. "I'll work on these tonight and tomorrow," she promised. "Have them ready before we leave." She was assigned Hutchins's quarters while he recovered in the office. It was small but clean, with a proper bed and a stove for warmth. Calder walked her there, carrying the pile of mending. "You did good," he said, "with the accounts, with the men. They respect competence. It's just work." "No." He set the clothes on the small table. "It's more than that. It's showing them you belong here, that you're not some delicate flower needing protection, but a woman who can pull her weight." He stood in the doorway, seeming reluctant to leave. The small room felt smaller with him in it, charged with possibility. "Where will you sleep?" she asked. "Bunkhouse with the men. Don't worry, I'll be close enough if you need anything." He touched his hat brim. "Lock the door. Not because I think anyone would bother you, but because it's good practice." After he left, Lena did lock the door. Then she built up the fire and settled into work. The mending was straightforward tears from hard labor. Worn seams, missing buttons. Her needle moved steadily, creating neat stitches that would hold through another season of work. Near midnight, a soft knock interrupted. She found Calder outside with a cup of tea and a wool scarf. "Thought you might be cold," he said, offering both. "Mountain nights are harsh." She accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "You didn't need to check on me." "No, but I wanted to." In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows. "This was probably foolish. Bringing you here. People will talk." "Let them." She surprised herself with the firmness of her voice. "I'm tired of arranging my life around what people might say." He smiled then, slow and real. "That's my Lena, strong as steel when it counts." "My Lena." The words hung between them like stars. She wanted to reach for him, to test what those words might mean, but the moment was too fragile, too new. "I should finish the mending," she said softly. "And I should get some sleep." But he didn't move. "Lena." "Yes. I'm glad you came, not just for the work, For, he gestured helplessly at the space between them. This, whatever this is. Me too, she whispered. He left then, quickly, like he didn't trust himself to linger. Lena closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing. Whatever this is, not a declaration, not a promise, but a recognition that something was building between them, slow and steady as her stitches. She worked until her eyes burned, then banked the fire and crawled into bed. Outside, wind sang through the pines. She could hear the distant sound of men snoring in the bunkhouse, the crack of settling logs, the wild night sounds of the mountain. But she wasn't afraid. Calder was out there, watching, and tomorrow they would ride back to Red Hollow together, changed by this small adventure, changed by trust freely given and carefully held. She slept deep and dreamless, the knife untouched in her boot, the door locked but no longer a barrier against fear, just a sensible precaution in a sensible world where a woman could work for her living and a man could offer protection without demanding payment, where whatever this is could grow in its own time, strong as mountain pine, steady as her stitching hands. The ride back to Red Hollow started in companionable silence, the wagon wheels crunching through fresh snow that had fallen overnight. Lena sat beside Calder on the driver's bench, the completed ledgers and mended clothes packed carefully in the back. The mountain air was crystal sharp, painting their breath in white puffs. They'd been traveling an hour when Calder spoke. The men were impressed. Hutchins, too, once the fever broke. Said you saved him weeks of work. It wasn't so difficult once I found the system. Lena pulled her cloak tighter. Though whoever taught them arithmetic should be ashamed. That'd be me, in some cases. His mouth quirked. Never claimed to be a teacher. They were descending into a valley when the weather changed. Clouds rolled in from the north, heavy and dark as bruised flesh. The temperature dropped fast enough to make the horses nervous. Storm coming, Calder said, studying the sky. Big one. We need shelter. He pushed the horses harder, but the snow started before they could reach the main road. Fat flakes at first, then a white curtain that erased the world beyond the horses' heads. Wind picked up, driving ice crystals horizontal. There's an old line shack about a mile east. Calder shouted over the growing gale. Miners used it before the new road got built. Can you hold on? Lena gripped the wagon seat as he turned the horses off the trail. The world became a howling white void. She trusted his memory, his knowledge of these mountains, even as the wagon lurched over invisible obstacles. The shack materialized from the storm like a miracle, a small log structure with a stone chimney, barely visible until they were almost upon it. Calder jumped down, fighting the wind to open the door. Get inside, he ordered. I'll tend the horses. The shack's interior was basic but solid. One room with a fireplace, a rough table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bunk built into the wall. Supplies lined shelves, canned goods, blankets, matches, a refuge for travelers caught exactly as they were. Lena got a fire started while Calder brought the horses around to the lean-to attached to the shack's side. By the time he stumbled through the door, covered in snow, she had flames crackling and coffee heating. How long, she asked, helping him out of his frozen coat. Could be hours, could be days. He moved to the fire, holding his hands to the warmth. These early winter storms are unpredictable. We're lucky we found shelter. Lucky. Stranded in a one-room shack with a man who made her heart race. Lena busied herself checking supplies to hide her sudden nervousness. There's food enough for several days, she reported. Beans, salt pork, hardtack, even some preserved peaches. Mountain hospitality. Take what you need. Replace it when you can. Calder had recovered enough to help her inventory. There's a wood pile under the eaves. We'll be warm enough. Warm. Yes, that was the problem. The shack was small enough that they couldn't help but brush against each other as they moved about. Each accidental touch sent sparks through her that had nothing to do with static from the wool. They prepared a simple meal, working together with the ease of long practice. The storm raged outside, making the small space feel even more intimate. When they sat to eat, their knees touched under the small table. "I should apologize," Calder said suddenly. "This isn't proper, you being here with me like this." "Would proper be better? Should I sit outside in the storm to preserve my reputation?" "That's not what I—" "Calder." She set down her spoon. "We both know my reputation was compromised the moment Samuel Morrison left me at the altar of public opinion. Everything since has been damage control. You're more than that, more than what he did to you. I know. You helped me know that." She met his eyes across the table. "But I'm tired of living by rules that don't protect me, only constrain me. Aren't you—" He was quiet, studying her face in the firelight. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're here. The storm's here. Let's just be here. No worrying about tomorrow or what people think. Just two people sharing shelter from a storm." Something shifted in his expression, a loosening of the constant control he kept. Just two people. Friends, if you like. Friends who trust each other. "Friends," he tested the word. "Is that what we are? Lena?" The question hung between them like a held breath. Outside, wind shrieked and snow battered the walls. But inside, the world had narrowed to this moment, this question. "I don't know," she admitted. "I know you've been kind to me, protected me. I know I feel safe with you, seen by you." "Seen?" He leaned back, never breaking eye contact. "First time I saw you in Morrison's dining room, you looked like you'd been fighting all night. Reminded me of a horse I knew once thoroughbred. Strong as they come, but spooked. Took months of patience before she'd let me close enough to touch." "I'm not a horse." Calder. "No." His voice dropped lower. "You're not." They cleaned up dinner in charged silence. The storm showed no signs of weakening. If anything, it grew fiercer, making the walls creak and the chimney moan. They'd be here all night at least, possibly longer. "You take the bunk," Calder said. "I'll bed down by the fire. The floor's too cold. We can share the bunk." The words came out before she could stop them. "For warmth, it's practical." He went very still. "Lena, I trust you." She meant it. "You've shown me nothing but respect. I don't believe that changes just because we're sharing a bed for warmth in a storm." "Your trust means everything. I won't risk it." "Then don't, but don't freeze on the floor out of misplaced propriety either." They prepared for bed awkwardly, taking turns behind the moth-eaten curtain that provided a pretense of privacy. Lena kept her dress on, only removing her boots and loosening her stays. When she lay down on the narrow bunk, back pressed to the wall, she left space for him. He joined her carefully, still in his shirt and trousers, lying on his back with inches between them. The bunk creaked under their combined weight. "This is—" He seemed at a loss for words. "Practical," she supplied, "and warm." Silence fell, broken only by the storm's fury and the fire's crackle. Despite the strange intimacy, Lena found herself relaxing. Calder's presence was comforting, his breathing steady and calm. The heat from his body reached her even across the careful distance. "Tell me about Sarah," she said into the darkness. "What was she like?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, stubborn, Lord, but she was stubborn. Once decided on something. Mountain couldn't move her. Taught herself to read with a Bible and pure determination. Used to write me letters full of big words she'd learned. "You miss her." "Every day. But it's different now. Less like drowning, more like an old scar that aches in bad weather." He shifted slightly. "She would have liked you. Would have admired how you picked yourself up. Started over. I had help. You had yourself first. I just noticed." They talked quietly as the storm raged. About small things, the challenges of winter, the personalities of Red Hollow's residents, books they'd read. The careful distance between them gradually closed until Lena could feel his warmth all along her side. "I was married once," she found herself saying, "before, back east." Calder went still. "You never mentioned—" "Not something I talk about. He was charming at first, said all the right things, but after the wedding, he wanted to make me smaller. Criticized how I walked, how I talked, how much space I took up. When I wouldn't shrink enough to suit him, he tried other methods." "Lena," Calder's voice was rough. "Did he hurt you?" "He tried. Once. I broke his nose with a skillet and left that night." She felt rather than saw Calder's fierce smile. "The divorce was ugly. He made sure everyone knew I was a violent, unwomanly creature who couldn't be controlled. No one wanted to hire me after that. His loss, their loss. That's why Samuel's letters seemed like salvation, a fresh start where no one knew my history." She laughed bitterly. "Fool me twice, I suppose." Calder turned toward her then, his face a shadow in the dying firelight. "You're no fool. You're one of the strongest people I know. And any man who wanted to make you smaller wasn't worth the dirt on your boots." His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. Such a simple touch, but it sent warmth flooding through her. "Sometimes I think I'm too damaged for anything real." She whispered, "We're all damaged. Question is whether we let it define us or refine us." His thumb stroked over her knuckles. "You've been refined into something remarkable. Lena Gracewood." They lay there, hands clasped, as the storm began to ease. The wind still howled, but with less fury. Snow still fell, but softer now. The world was settling into quiet. Calder. "Thank you for seeing me. The real me, not the story others tell." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for letting yourself be seen." Sleep came gradually, pulled them under like a warm tide. They shifted in dreams, bodies naturally seeking comfort. By morning, they lay entwined, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Legs tangled together. Not as lovers, but as two people who'd found safe harbor in each other. The fire had died to embers. Pale light filtered through frost-covered windows. The storm had passed, leaving the world remade in white. But inside the shack, something else had been remade too. A friendship deepened into something richer, though neither was ready to name it yet. Calder woke first but didn't move, content to hold this moment. Hold her, for as long as the world allowed. Lena stirred against him, murmuring something that might have been his name. "Storm's over," he said softly. "I know." She didn't pull away. "We should get back." "We should." Neither moved. Outside, Red Hollow waited with its judgments and expectations. But here, now, they had a perfect, quiet moment of connection born from trust and storm and shared warmth. Finally, reluctantly, they rose, dressed properly, banked the fire and tidied the shack for the next travelers who might need shelter, loaded the wagon and hitched the horses. But something fundamental had shifted, and they both knew it. The ride back to Red Hollow was different. They sat closer on the bench. Their silences held new meaning. When the town appeared ahead, Lena felt both relief and regret. "People will talk," she said, "about us being gone overnight." "Let them." Calder's jaw set firm. "I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters." But as they rolled down Main Street, Lena saw the curtains twitch, the heads turn. By evening, everyone would know. The seamstress and Calder Boone, caught in a storm, alone together all night. Her reputation, already fragile, might not survive this. Calder seemed to read her thoughts. As they stopped in front of Mrs. Chen's, he turned to her with eyes full of determination. "Whatever comes next," he said, "you won't face it alone. That's a promise." The consequences came swiftly. By the next morning, Lena's shop stood empty of customers. Women who'd promised work didn't appear. Those she passed on the street offered tight smiles or averted their eyes entirely. Only Mrs. Chen remained unchanged, serving breakfast with her usual practical efficiency. Town's talking. Mrs. Chen said simply, "Say you spent night with Boone Man. Alone." "We were caught in a storm. We took shelter." Lena pushed eggs around her plate. Appetite gone. Nothing improper happened. "I believe, but town wants scandal more than truth." Mrs. Chen refilled her coffee cup. "This will pass or it won't. Either way, you survive." Lena tried to believe that as she opened her shop. The morning stretched empty. Then afternoon, she reorganized supplies, cleaned what was already clean, tried not to think about rent coming due and her dwindling funds. Near closing time, the door chimed. Mrs. Morrison entered, face pinched with disapproval. "I've come for honesty," she announced. "The whole town's buzzing. Did you or did you not spend the night with Calder Boone?" "We were caught in a storm returning from the lumber camp. We sheltered in a line shack. Separately." Lena kept her voice level. "Would you prefer I'd frozen to death to protect a reputation your son already ruined?" Mrs. Morrison's mouth tightened. "Don't you dare blame Samuel. He escaped before you could trap him." "Trap him!" Anger flared hot. "He asked me to come. He promised marriage. He left me with nothing. And now you've set your sights on Calder Boone? Well, I've come to warn you. That man's not what he seems. Ask him about Thomas Garrett. Ask him why he really left Denver." She swept out, leaving poison in her wake. Lena stood frozen, mind racing. What did she really know about Calder? He'd been nothing but kind. But Mrs. Morrison's words gnawed at her. Men who seemed good often hid the deepest darkness. The shop bell rang again. Mr. Donnelly, the minister, entered with careful dignity. "Miss Gracewood, I've come on behalf of several concerned citizens." "Concerned about my soul, Reverend—" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "About the example being set. Red Hollow is trying to be a respectable town. We can't have irregularities." "What irregularities? I work hard, pay my debts, help where I can." "You live in the Chinese Quarter. You travel unchaperoned with a man. Now this incident." He cleared his throat. "Perhaps it would be best if you considered moving on, for everyone's sake." The words hit like physical blows. "You're asking me to leave!" Suggesting, before things become unpleasant. He set an envelope on her counter. "Several families have contributed. Enough for stage fare to California. A fresh start." After he left, Lena stared at the envelope. Blood money to make her disappear, to clean up the mess of her existence. Her hands shook as she counted it, enough indeed for passage away. Away from the shop she'd begun to build, away from the first place she'd felt safe. Away from Calder. As if summoned by thought, he appeared at her door as the sun set. His face was tight with controlled fury. "Heard Donnelly came by," he said without preamble. "Him and his righteous committee." "And Mrs. Morrison." Lena showed him the envelope. "They want me gone." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "And what do you want?" "I want to stop running. I want to build something real. I want—" She stopped, unable to voice the rest. "I want you." "There's another option." Calder moved closer, his presence filling the small shop. "But you might not like it." "Tell me." "Marry me." The words hung between them like a thunderclap. Lena's breath caught. "You don't mean that." "I do." He caught her hands, held them firm. "Not because of the storm or the gossip. Because I can't stand the thought of you leaving. Because I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep the same. Because you're the first person in years who makes me want to be better than I am." Mrs. Morrison said to ask about Thomas Garrett. Said to ask why you left Denver. His face went still. She would bring that up. He released her hands, turned to stare out the window. Thomas Garrett was my business partner. We had a freight company, did well until he started skimming. When I confronted him, he pulled a gun. I was faster. You killed him. Self-defense. Law cleared me, but his family had money. Influence. Made life impossible. So I came here. Started over. He faced her again. Just like you. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Both fleeing past shadows, trying to build new lives. Both marked by violence they hadn't chosen. That's why you understood, she said softly. Why you helped me. Maybe at first, but then I got to know you. Your strength, your kindness, the way you hum when you're working. His voice roughened. I'm not proposing out of pity or propriety. I'm proposing because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Calder. She felt tears threaten. I don't even know if I can be a proper wife. My first marriage. I don't want proper. I want real. I want a partner, not a possession. He stepped closer, cupping her face gently. I want Sunday mornings with coffee and quiet, evenings by the fire with you mending and me pretending to read while really watching you. I want to wake up beside you every day, knowing you chose to be there. The town can accept it or not, but married, they can't run you off. You'd have standing protection. The shop would thrive because they'd have to respect you as my wife, even if they don't as yourself. It was practical and romantic at once. So perfectly Calder she almost smiled, but doubt lingered. I can't be someone's property again. I won't be made smaller. Then be bigger. Be everything you are. Just be it with me. His thumb stroked her cheek. Equal partners. Your shop, your money, your choices. I just want to stand beside you while you make them. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you bind yourself to someone so complicated? Because complications make life interesting. Because you're worth 10 of their proper ladies. Because... He took a breath. Because I love you. Lena, have since you sat there with a knife all night, ready to fight the world, made me want to fight it for you instead. The tears came then, hot and cleansing. No one had ever loved the fighter in her. They'd wanted to tame it, shame it, break it. But Calder saw it and loved it. I don't know if I know how to love right. She admitted, neither do I. We'll learn together. She thought of the empty shop, the envelope of escape money, the cold eyes of proper society. Then she thought of waking in his arms during the storm, feeling safe and seen and whole. Yes, she whispered. His eyes widened. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to partnership. Yes to fighting the world together instead of alone. Her voice strengthened. Yes to everything. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was precious and powerful at once. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. When? Soon, before I lose my nerve or the town runs us both off. Tomorrow, Reverend Donnelly can marry us, or I'll find someone who will. She laughed, wild and free. He'll be scandalized. Good. Man needs shaking up. Calder pulled her close. We'll live above the shop until I can build us something better. That acceptable? More than... She thought of something. What about the gossips? This will just confirm what they're thinking. Let them think it. They'll tell stories either way. Might as well give them a good one. His grin was boyish, transforming his weathered face. The seamstress who tamed Calder Boone, the cowboy who rescued the fallen woman. Let them pick whichever version makes them feel superior. While we live our own version. Exactly. They spent another hour planning, dreaming, kissing when words failed. When full dark fell, Calder walked her to Mrs. Chen's one last time. At the door, he kissed her again. Longer, deeper, full of promise. "Tomorrow you come home with me," he said against her lips. "No more locked doors, no more fear, just us." "Just us," she agreed. Inside, Mrs. Chen took one look at her face and smiled. "Good, that man has sense. You keep each other strong." That night, Lena packed her few belongings. The knife went in the trunk, still important, but no longer needed under her pillow. Tomorrow would bring a new name, new status, new challenges. The town would gossip. Some would shun them. Others would test the boundaries. But she wouldn't face it alone. Never alone again. She thought of Calder's proposal not on bended knee with flowers and poetry, but standing in her shop with envelope of bribe money between them, offering partnership in the face of exile. It was perfect. They were both too scarred for fairy tales, too practical for grand romance. Instead, they had something better: understanding, acceptance, love that saw clearly and chose anyway. Tomorrow, she'd walk into that church with her head high. Let them whisper. Let them judge. She'd found something worth fighting for, someone worth building with. The seamstress and the cowboy, two damaged souls making each other whole. It would be enough, more than enough. It would be everything. The wedding was simple. Lena wore her blue dress with new lace at the collar. Calder stood beside her in his best shirt, freshly shaven, hat in his hands. Mrs. Chen and her son served as witnesses. Reverend Donnelly performed the ceremony with visible reluctance, his words clipped and formal. When Calder slipped a plain gold band on her finger, his mother's, he'd whispered, Lena felt something settle in her chest. Not completion, but possibility. When he kissed her at the ceremony's end, gentle and sure, she heard Mrs. Chen's approving hum. They walked from the church to the shop together, ignoring the stares from windows and doorways. Word had spread like wildfire. The fallen woman and the killer cowboy. Making it official. Some watched with disapproval, others with curiosity, a few with something that might have been envy. The shop felt different when they entered, no longer just hers, but theirs. Calder had moved his few possessions to the back room that morning. His shaving kit sat beside her brush, his spare boots beneath the bed. Simple changes that spoke of permanence. "I'll build shelves," he said, surveying the cramped space. "Maybe expand that window for more light." "It's enough," Lena said. "More than enough." He turned to her then, something uncertain in his eyes. "I want to do right by you, be a good husband, but I'm not sure I know how. And I'm not sure I know how to be a wife again. Last time..." She trailed off, old fear flickering. "Last time you were alone. This time, we're together." He drew her close, and she let herself lean into his strength. "We'll figure it out." The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Mrs. Patterson arrived first, carrying a basket. "Wedding gift," she said briskly, not meeting Lena's eyes. "Preserves and pickles, practical things." "Thank you." Lena accepted the basket, unsure if this was support or farewell. Mrs. Patterson hesitated at the door. "My Herald needs new work shirts. 3 of them, when you're settled." It wasn't an embrace of their marriage, but it wasn't rejection either. Business would continue, even if friendship wouldn't. Others came throughout the day, some to gawk, some to test the new boundaries. Watson appeared near sunset, whiskey bowled and accompanied by his usual shadows. They lounged against the shop front, voices carrying. "Heard Boone finally made an honest woman of her," Watson said loudly. "Wonder how long before he realizes what he saddled himself with." Calder emerged from the back room so quietly, Watson didn't see him until a hand landed heavy on his shoulder. "You're right," Calder said conversationally. "I did saddle myself, with a woman who works hard, keeps her word, and could probably take you apart with her mending scissors if provoked. I'd say I got the better end of the bargain." Watson tried to shrug off the hand, failed. "Just making conversation." "Make it elsewhere," My wife's shop is closed for the day. The possessive pronoun rang like a bell. My wife. And Watson, next time you darken our doorway, better be with money for mending. Otherwise, find somewhere else to loiter. After they'd slunk away, Calder turned to find Lena watching from the doorway. Our doorway, she asked softly. Everything I have is yours. Everything you have is mine. That's what marriage means to me. He touched her cheek. That acceptable? More than acceptable. They prepared supper together in the small back room, moving around each other with careful grace. The intimacy of shared space was new, reaching around him for plates, brushing past to tend the stove. Each touch sent awareness sparking between them. I'm not much of a cook, Calder admitted, watching her slice bread. Been batching it so long, I forgot food could taste good. I'm practical, not fancy. Don't expect miracles. Already got my miracle, he said quietly. Rest is just details. They ate by lamplight, talking about mundane things, plans for the shop, orders needed from Denver, which roof boards needed replacing, safe topics that skirted around the fact that soon they'd share not just supper but a bed, a life, everything. When darkness fell properly, they cleaned up in charged silence. Lena could feel the weight of expectation, of what wedding nights were supposed to mean. Her hands shook slightly as she dried the last dish. Lena, Calder's voice was gentle. Look at me. She turned to find him holding out a wrapped package. Wedding gift. Figured you should have something nice for tonight. Inside was a nightgown of soft white cotton, simple but well made, with small buttons down the front and lace at the cuffs. Store-bought, which must have cost dear. It's beautiful, she whispered. You're beautiful. This is just cloth. He touched her hand. But if you'd rather just sleep tonight, that's fine too. We've got time, all the time in the world. The echo of their first night in the storm, two people choosing trust over expectation, made her eyes burn. You'd wait. Forever, if that's what you needed. I meant what I said. Partners, equals. Your choices matter as much as mine. She thought of her first wedding night, rough hands, harsh words, her dignity stripped away with her clothes. This was nothing like that. This was Calder, who'd stood guard in hallways and left his hat as protection, who saw her strength as something to admire, not break. I don't want to wait, she said quietly. I want to start our life. All of it, but slowly, gently. Always, he promised. She changed behind the curtain, fingers trembling with nerves and anticipation rather than fear. The nightgown felt strange after sleeping in her clothes for so long. Vulnerable, but not unsafe. When she emerged, Calder had turned down the lamp and was sitting on the bed's edge, still dressed. Your turn, she managed. He smiled, understanding her need for equality, even in this, while he changed. She slid beneath the quilts, heart hammering. This was choice. This was trust. This was nothing like before. When he joined her, movements careful and contained, she reached for him. His sharp intake of breath made her brave. I've never, she started, then stopped. I mean, I have, but not with love. Not with choosing. Then we'll make it new, he said against her hair. Just us. Just this. What followed was patience and gentleness and discovery. Hands learning the geography of scars and strength. Whispered questions. Is this all right? Does this please you? And breathless answers. No taking, only giving. No conquest, only communion. Later, lying entwined in the narrow bed, Lena traced patterns on Calder's chest. Was it what you expected? Expected to love you. Didn't expect to fall deeper with every touch. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. You expected fear, found freedom instead. She burrowed closer. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for being brave. They dozed, woke, loved again with growing confidence. Near dawn, Lena stirred to find Calder watching her, a smile playing at his lips. "What?" "Just thinking. Yesterday morning I woke alone, convinced you'd leave town. Now you're here, wearing my ring, sharing my name. Feels like a dream." "Not a dream," she assured him. "Too real for dreams, too messy and complicated and perfect." "Perfect," he agreed, pulling her close. "Our kind of perfect." When true dawn came, they rose together, dressed together, faced the world together. The shop would open soon, bringing customers or judgment or both. The town would test them, push boundaries, wait for them to fail. But here in their small room above the shop, with morning light catching on a gold ring and the memory of gentle hands still warm on her skin, Lena felt ready for whatever came. She had work that mattered, a home that locked, a partner who saw her true and loved her anyway. And when Calder placed his hat on the table, not as protection now, but as promise, as presence, as permanence, she knew she'd never need to hold a knife through the night again. She was home, she was loved, she was free. Everything else was just details. "Ready to face the day, Mrs. Boone?" Calder asked, offering his arm. "Ready?" she said, taking it. "With you, I'm ready for anything." They descended to the shop together, footsteps matching, hearts aligned. Whatever Red Hollow brought, they'd meet it as one. Partners, equals, two souls choosing each other again with every sunrise. It was more than enough. It was everything. It was theirs. Winter melted into spring with a gradual warming that matched the town's slow acceptance of the Boone marriage. The shop flourished partly from Lena's skill, partly from curiosity about the woman who'd tamed Calder Boone. Women who'd shunned her in December were placing orders by March, drawn by necessity and the undeniable quality of her work. This morning held special promise. Lena stood before the new wooden sign Calder had carved, Gracewood and Company, fine tailoring and mending. He'd insisted on keeping her name, making it clear this was her business, her achievement. "It's perfect," she said, running her fingers over the letters. "You're perfect. Sign's just wood and paint." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy. More than I knew was possible." 6 months of marriage had taught them each other's rhythms. Calder still left for the mines before dawn, returning as afternoon shadows grew long. Lena worked steady through the day, the shop bell chiming regularly now. Evenings were theirs, quiet suppers, shared silence, the deep peace of chosen companionship. "Mrs. Donnelly's coming by today," Lena mentioned. "Wants a new Easter dress." "The minister's wife, the one who tried to run you out of town." "Times change, people change." She turned in his arms. "We changed." He kissed her forehead. Some changes are worth everything. The shop filled quickly once she opened. 3 miners needed patches. Mrs. Patterson wanted tablecloths hemmed, and young Lucy brought a doll whose dress had torn. "Can you fix her?" Lucy asked solemnly. "She's my favorite." "Of course." Lena examined the tiny garment with the same care she'd give any commission. "Come back after lunch. She'll be good as new." Mrs. Donnelly arrived at midday, carrying a bolt of sage-green fabric. "I admired Mrs. Watson's new dress at church. She said you made it." Irony wasn't lost on Lena Watson's wife wearing her work, but business was business, and redemption came in strange forms. "I can make something similar, adjusted for your preferences." They discussed styles, measurements, timing, professional talk that held no warmth but no hostility either. Progress of a sort. "Your work is excellent," Mrs. Donnelly admitted as she prepared to leave. "I was hasty in my judgments before. A town needs skilled people, regardless of their histories." Not an apology, but acknowledgement. Lena would take it. The afternoon brought unexpected drama. Calder appeared hours early, face grim. With him was a young woman barely more than a girl, travel-stained and tearful. "This is Miss Catherine Price," he said, just off the stage. "She's in some trouble." The girl's story tumbled out between sobs. Promised marriage, abandoned at a way station, money stolen. The same old tale with fresh pain. She'd used her last coins for passage to Red Hollow, hoping to find work. "I can sew," she said desperately. "I'm good with numbers. I'll do anything honest. Please." Lena saw herself 6 months ago, desperate, frightened, clinging to dignity by threads. She glanced at Calder, saw the same recognition in his eyes. "Can you use an assistant?" he asked quietly. "Shop's getting busier." "I can pay room and board plus a small wage," Lena told the girl. "You'll help with mending, mind the shop when needed. Mrs. Chen has a room available, safe, clean, locks that work. Are you willing?" Catherine's tears came fresh, but grateful now. "Yes, oh, yes, thank you." They settled her at Mrs. Chen's, introduced her around. Watching Calder gentle with the frightened girl, Lena felt her heart expand. He'd learned tenderness from tending her fears. Now that tenderness extended outward, encompassing others who needed shelter from life's storms. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Lena studied her husband. "You brought her to me." "Figured you'd understand better than most. Besides, you needed help. 2 birds, 1 stone. Practical man." She smiled, with a soft heart. "Your fault. You went and made me care about people again." They settled into bed, Lena curling against his warmth. Through the window, stars pricked the clear sky. Below, Red Hollow slept mostly peaceful. There'd always be Watsons, always be judgment. But there was also this connection, purpose, the quiet revolution of 2 damaged people choosing wholeness together. "Calder." "I'm glad I stayed. Glad I didn't take that stage fare to California." His arm tightened around her. "Makes 2 of us. Can't imagine this place without you. Can't imagine any place without you." She thought of Catherine downstairs, probably lying awake as Lena once had, knife close at hand. Tomorrow, she'd teach the girl about more than sewing, about surviving, about waiting for the right person to see your worth, about building something from nothing but determination and thread. "We should expand the shop," she said. "With Catherine helping, we could take more orders. Maybe add ready-made items for the miners." "Whatever you want. It's your business." "Our business, our life." She pressed a kiss to his jaw. "Everything shared. Remember?" "Everything," he agreed. They talked softly about possibilities, a larger storefront. Maybe bringing in fabric from Denver to sell, teaching other women to sew, dreams that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, when she was just trying to survive each night. A noise outside made them both freeze, footsteps on the stairs. But then came Catherine's voice, tentative. "Mrs. Chen, I heard something." Mrs. Chen's firm response. "Just the building settling. Go back to bed. You're safe here." Lena smiled against Calder's shoulder. The cycle continuing protection offered, fear slowly easing, trust building 1 night at a time. "We did good today," Calder said. "We did good these 6 months, built something real. Just the beginning." He yawned, pulling her closer. "Got years ahead to build more." Years, the word that once would have terrified her, years trapped. Years enduring now promised only possibility. Years of morning coffee and evening conversation. Years of work that mattered and love that lasted. Years of Calder's hat on their table, marking home. The next morning brought spring sunshine and a line of customers. Catherine proved quick-minded and careful-handed, freeing Lena to tackle more complex projects. The shop hummed with productivity and purpose. When Calder stopped by at lunch, he found them both bent over work, teaching and learning in focused concentration. His smile was proud and private, meant just for Lena. "Brought food," he said, setting down a basket from the boarding house. "Figured you'd forget to eat." They shared the meal, fresh bread, early vegetables, the first strawberries of the season. Catherine excused herself to eat in the back room, giving them privacy. "She's working out well," Lena said. "You're a good teacher, patient, kind." He caught her hand. "Everything I knew you'd be." "Learned from the best." She squeezed his fingers. "From a man who left his hat by my door when I needed protecting." "Don't need protecting anymore. You're stronger than half the men in this town." "Maybe, but I still like knowing you're there. Still like wearing your ring, sharing your name." She touched the gold band that had grown familiar on her finger. "Still like being yours." "And I'm yours," he said simply. "Always have been, from that first morning in Morrison's dining room. Just took us a while to figure it out." The shop bell chimed, bringing new customers. Calder kissed her quick and left, but his presence lingered in the warmth of her hand, the certainty in her chest. By closing time, they'd completed 6 orders and taken 4 more. Catherine helped clean and organize, eager to prove her worth. As they locked up, the younger woman turned to Lena with shining eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for taking a chance on me, for showing me kindness when you didn't have to." "Someone showed me kindness once," Lena replied. "Changed everything. Now it's your turn to accept it. Then pass it on when the time comes." Walking home, and it was home now. Truly home, Lena reflected on the journey. From that terrified night at Morrison's Inn to this evening of accomplished work and waiting love. The woman who'd gripped a knife in darkness had transformed into one who wielded needles in daylight, creating rather than defending. Calder was already there, having started supper. The smell of stewing beef filled their small space. He'd picked Wildflower's clumsy handful of color and put them in a mason jar on the table. "What's the occasion?" she asked. 6 months married. Figured that was worth marking." He looked almost shy. "Too much." "Perfect." She went to him, wrapped her arms around his solid warmth. "You're perfect." "Far from it, but I'm trying for you." "Not for me, with me. Everything with me." They stood there as shadows lengthened, holding each other in the space they'd made theirs. Outside. Red Hollow went about its evening business. Inside. 2 people who'd known the sharp edges of life chose softness, chose healing, chose love that mended stronger than any seam. "No regrets?" Calder asked against her hair. "None, not one." Lena pulled back to see his face. "This is what I was meant for. This life, this work, this love. You." "Always was going to be you," he said. "Just had to wait for you to arrive." She kissed him then, deep and sure, tasting promises kept and futures building. When they parted, the wildflowers caught the last light like hope itself, bright, imperfect, absolutely right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new orders, new chances to prove their worth. But tonight was theirs earned, chosen, cherished. The seamstress had found her home. The cowboy had found his heart. Together. They'd stitched a life from remnants and made it beautiful. Strong seams, careful stitches, love that held fast through every storm. Their beginning had been fear and providence. Their ending, no. Their continuing was choice and courage and the quiet revolution of 2 people building something larger than their scars. In the morning, she'd open the shop. He'd head to the mines. Life would move forward in its daily rhythm. But first, this supper shared, stories told, bodies warm and close in the bed they'd blessed with trust. The hat on the table no longer marking protection but presence. The knife in the trunk no longer needed but never forgotten. They'd traveled far from that first frightened night. And the journey, Lena knew, was only beginning. Hand in hand, stitch by stitch, breath by breath. Home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey through the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850, hit that like button. And don't forget to click the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything.